Hello, I'm William Woodbridge. In today's presentation, I will be analysing a Year 1 lesson that focuses on the oral retelling of the story The Gingerbread Man. In this lesson, the teacher aims to familiarise the students with the Gingerbread Man through oral retellings and puppetry use. Eventually, the video also goes on to have a post observation reflection that gives insights into the pedagogical choices made throughout the lesson delivery as well. This lesson was designed to help support language development, sequencing, and memory. To analyse the lesson, I've chosen to focus on information processing theory and cognitive load theory, both insightful into how students attend to, store, and retrieve information. Let's jump in and have a bit of a closer look first at information processing theory. Information processing theory is the first of the two theories I'll be delving a bit deeper into today. So information processing theory is particularly helpful when we look at how learners store and retrieve information. In early primary classrooms where attention spans are short and working memory is still developing, this theory is especially useful. It highlights the importance of reducing unnecessary distractions, repeating key content, and using multimodal input to support encoding. The Gingerbread Man lesson offers clear examples of how these principles are applied in practice to support memory formation and narrative understanding. Encoding, the process of taking in new information and preparing it for storage and long-term memory. In this lesson, we see that encoding improves when content is meaningful, familiar, repeated, and well-structured. In this lesson, we see that students listen to a full narrative, make a puppet for each character, and engage with the story elements repeatedly. These steps prompt strong initial encoding. Attention, the cognitive mechanism for selecting what information to process, is a precondition for encoding and has limited capacity, particularly in young children. We can see that in this lesson, the young students require structured and engaged prompts and lessons to maintain focus. Managing attention in a structured way ensures that students are actively engaging with the content, increasing the quality of the encoding. Without intention, you will not get very much encoding. In the lesson, we can see that the teacher uses short task segments, lots of engaging things like asking questions, puppets, and guiding students through the lesson. This is to help reduce the distraction and support memory encoding. If we have a look at some of the dual coding practices that were used in the lesson, we can see that there was a multi-modality theme throughout the entire lesson. In particular, it was focused on the storytelling, so that was reading. It was focused on the puppet making, so that was very kinesthetic. And it was focused on the oral retellings. By activating both verbal and non-verbal pathways, dual coding increased the likelihood that the students would recall and remember the key details of this lesson. When we go to look at rehearsal and retrieval within information processing theory, we can see that the story was retold multiple times in this lesson. So this multiple exposure is throughout a few different theories as well, including interleaving. It's part of the HIT strategy as well, I believe. With the rehearsal and retrieval, this was key in building up towards the summative task of having the students retell the story orally with as many narrative details as they could remember using the puppets as prompt. Active retrieval strengthens memory and improves fluent oral expression, a key development goal in Year 1 literacy. Let's have a look at chunking and sequencing. So chunking is where you group information into manageable units, and sequencing is placing those units into a logical order. So the chunking in this was largely used with the puppets. So each of the puppets was a story chunk in itself. The other thing that was important was the oral retelling element reduced the interactivity and cognitive load involved with telling the story, making it easier for students to organize and express their narrative. Information processing theory was an important lens to look at this lesson through because it shows how young children take in and remember information. This lesson uses clear steps, visual supports, and repeated practice to help students focus and hold on to key ideas. Even though it looks simple, it's built on smart choices that match how the brain works in early learning. Now that we've explored information processing theory in terms of attention, encoding, and retrieval, we can build off that foundation by looking at cognitive load theory. While information processing theory helps explain what happens in the mind during learning, cognitive load theory focuses more explicitly on how instruction should be designed to manage that process. I have found cognitive load theory invaluable already when it comes to designing and delivering lessons. Let's go have a closer look at why it's such a valuable and powerful tool. Effective literacy instruction must balance cognitive demand with developmental readiness. Cognitive load theory offers a model for understanding how instruction design can either support or hinder schema formation. When applied to oral retelling in Year 1, cognitive load theory enables educators to reduce unnecessary strain on working memory and create conditions for meaningful learning. This is particularly powerful when integrated with information processing theory, which emphasizes attention, encoding, and retrieval as foundation to literacy acquisition. Cognitive load theory helps manage this by breaking content into smaller, more manageable parts based on students' current levels of understanding. The Gingerbread Man used a linear, repetitive story structure with predictable character encounters, supported by puppet prompts and segmented narrative. This lesson also matched the task complexity to the student ability well. Its attention on building a strong mental model. This task also matched complexity to student ability well. Extraneous load can arise from poorly designed materials and distractions that compete with working memory. In cognitive load theory, we look to minimize these as much as possible. So when designing a lesson, we first ask ourselves what is going to be overwhelming for the students. And when you're looking at early primary school students, basic things such as how to hold a pen, writing, letter formation can all actually be cognitive loading that may be getting in the way of their storytelling. The teacher in this example used short, structured tasks, clear instructions, group organization, and behavioral cues to sustain focus and reduce confusion. Reducing the extraneous load helps protect limited working memory, allowing students to concentrate on story structure and language rather than navigating task logistics. So this is where perhaps if the task was delivered in another way, as in early primary, such as writing, the students would perhaps be cognitively overloaded with trying to form letters, get correct spelling, and figuring out how to write that. If we look at oral language as a biological primary skill, we can group that under the idea that it develops almost naturally. Reading and writing, on the other hand, are what we would consider in the cognitive load theory framework as a biologically secondary skill, and they are what require explicit instruction. So we're actually working on improving biological primary skills here. In delivering this lesson the way that the teacher has, they've been able to use biologically primary skills of oral retelling, storytelling. By leveraging the biologically primary skills, the teacher was able to build narrative competence, preparing for later literacy development. Why I chose cognitive load theory as an important theory to analyze this lesson through was because it helps explain how to design lessons that match what students can handle without becoming overloaded. This lesson uses clear structure, repetition, and visual cues to manage complexity and keep students focused. By supporting memory and reducing distractions, it helps learners build a strong foundation for oral language and storytelling. So all of this reinforces that effective teaching is not just about creating engaging activities. It's about designing for how students actually process, store, and retrieve information. By applying principles of both cognitive load theory and information processing theory, the teacher ensured that every aspect of the lesson worked in service of memory, attention, and schema formation. The key takeaway is clear. When lessons are planned with developmental theories in mind, we don't just occupy students with tasks, we help them internalize their knowledge in ways that are durable, transferable, and foundational for future learning. Thank you for your time.